Good afternoon, and welcome to the Campaign for College Opportunities kickoff in our series called Lunch Break, an opportunity for our partners and colleagues to engage with newly appointed higher education leaders. I'm Jessie Ryan, Executive Vice President of the Campaign for College Opportunity, and I'm extremely excited this afternoon to be joined by the incredible leader, Diego Arambula, a newly appointed trustee at the California State University system. Diego, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jessie. It's really great to be here.
So I'm going to embarrass you for a minute and share a bit about your very impressive background before we get going on what I hope will be a fun and lively conversation ranging from policy to just better understanding who you are as a person and what motivates you to do this critical work. So for those of you who are not familiar with Trustee Diego Arambula, Trustee Arambula is a remarkable education leader who has spent the majority of his career in K-12 innovation. He is currently the partner at Transcend, where he's working with teachers, principals, and superintendents across the country to reimagine learning environments to prepare children to thrive. But before that, Diego actually spent 15 years doing everything from teaching to serving as a principal and the Chief Growth and Innovation Officer at Summit Public Schools. He also was the founder and executive director of Go Public Schools, which is actually where I had the pleasure of first meeting Diego, in the heart of the Central Valley in his hometown of Fresno. I am proud to share that Diego is very much a source of pride for the Valley as an individual who went to Harvard and received his bachelor's degree in government, and then moved on to Stanford, where he received his master's degree in education, and is to this day not just an innovative higher ed and education leader, but a huge champion of lifting degree attainment in the Central Valley. Diego, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, Jessie. Appreciate it.
So before we jump into this conversation, we're actually going to ask to get a temperature check on who is in this virtual space. We'd love to know who is in the Zoom room. So we're going to ask you to take a moment to take a poll to share two things. The first being your role in education, and the second being the region that you come to us in. So we're going to launch that poll and hope you'll take a few moments to fill that out. Tell us who you are and what region you're joining us from. Okay. And I want to, as you're completing that poll, remind you that there is an opportunity for participants to not just view this conversation, but to really interact with Trustee Arambula by jumping in and asking questions that you might have of him later on in the hour. So please begin to upload those questions into the chat, and feel free to continue to upload questions throughout the time that we're chatting this afternoon, and we'll bring them into the latter point of today's conversation. So it looks like the majority of those who are joining us this afternoon are higher education advocates. And do we also have the region that they're joining us from? Okay, we don't have the region today, but thrilled to have people joining us from throughout the state. And once again, going to hear from you and ask your questions later on in the hour. So Diego, I want to just jump right into it. You know, I think when I first met you, what I was most impressed by was the incredible vision you had for the Central Valley. I mean, you both understood the transformational potential of education, but you were courageous in identifying breakages in the system and really looking for ways to be a steward of students and families in the Central Valley so that more children and families were reaching their college dreams. So tell us a little bit about yourself. how you came to this profession and why you're so passionate about education.
I remember that first conversation. We were sitting at a Starbucks back when people actually met face to face. Yeah, I don't know if I shared this story back then with you, Jesse, but for sure, this has driven so much of my work is thinking about my dad's journey and my own understanding of that, that has shifted over time. So my dad was the first in his family born here in this country. He was born in Brownsville, Texas. So if you know where that is, it's just right across the border. He grew up picking, first in Texas, then in California. And education absolutely transformed his life. He was able to go to college, get a master's degree, get a law degree. As a lawyer, serve and support people. As an elected official, serve and support people. And I grew up just thinking, this is it, right? This is the model that I had in my family. It was one I was so deeply proud of. I remain proud of it today. And so when I was in school, that's just the model that I wanted to follow. And school also worked for me by and large. It wasn't until I began teaching myself that I realized that for most kids who grew up like I did, who grew up like my dad did, for most low-income kids of color, school by and large isn't working. And we're just okay with it. And that's when I began to look back at my dad's same story, one that I've been so proud of, remain so proud of, and realized he's one of 7 and he's the only one who graduated from college in his family. And I just thought our system was okay that 6 of 7 Latino kids growing up in the Central Valley didn't make it. And we were actually okay elevating stories like my dad's while not elevating the story that for the other 6, it didn't help them transform their lives. And I just felt like that wasn't okay. And I see the potential in my Theos and Theas. I see the potential in so many of our kids. And yet our system just accepts that for some kids, it's going to work. And for the vast majority of kids, we aren't actually going to give them the readiness, the skills, and the ability to pursue and to earn a degree. And so it just didn't feel like it matched with the potential that I saw in all of the people around me. And so I realized this isn't on kids, it's not on families, it's not on communities, it's on us and the structures we build. And we've got to be willing and able to build different systems and structures if we want to support and give every young person the chance to transform their lives the same way my dad did. So I realized pretty early that we needed to do something pretty different.
So I love, Diego, your career focus on systems change. And I don't know if I shared with you, I actually first met your dad as a member of the legislature. For those who are watching and don't know, Diego's father was an assembly member representing the Central Valley for many years. And I remember a conversation I had with him early in my tenure at the Campaign for College Opportunity, when I talked about this notion that so many individuals had that not all children were college material. And that so many of our students in the Central Valley didn't need to be given college options because that wasn't going to be their path. And, he was absolutely indignant about that. And he ended up becoming a co-author of Save Me a Spot in College legislation and helping to support promise work that I know has continued on in the region because of exactly what you identified. This notion that it's not okay that some students would have the supports and the opportunities and other students would slip through the cracks. So you are continuing a very important legacy that your father and others in your family have made the heart of their work. I want to talk a little bit more about this new role that you're taking on. So, you talked about your passion for systems change. We know that you have had a long and illustrious career working in K-12. So why higher ed? Why at this moment? And why seek an appointment to the CSU trustees?
I don't want to walk past this last piece because I just want to name one thing and then I promise I'm going to answer your question about
no problem.
Board. I've had a number of conversations with superintendents who tell me we need to make sure that we have career technical education. And I absolutely agree that we should have options for all students. But until and unless we see our CTE courses and our college and career courses appropriately match the demographics of districts, we cannot stand by and allow our college going courses to be primarily white and Asian students and our CTE courses to be primarily low income African American and Latino students. And too often in places like Fresno Unified and in other cities across the state and country, that's what we see. And we see that we're creating quote unquote options, but what we're really doing is limiting folks' potential and sort of tracking folks in
them.
Choices. And we just can't be okay with that. So that aside, I chose to, I said I'd come back to your question. I came to think about the CSU mostly because I don't stop thinking about kids once they turn 18. Most of my time in K-12 has been spent in high schools, specifically thinking about preparing kids for college and thinking about how we can make sure that they don't just get accepted into a four-year school, but they actually have the skills and the traits to thrive in a four-year college and to earn a degree. And so when this chance to continue that work after high school opened up, I was really excited to think about how I might be able to play any small role. And I've spent so much of my time thinking about the systems and the structures in the K-12 space. There are also equally, and this is the largest public university in the country. So the ability to shift systems and structures in the higher education space felt like such a wonderful opportunity to continue that same work I've been driving towards for the last 15 plus years.
No, it absolutely is an incredible opportunity. And I think at this moment in time, your voice and your leadership is needed more than ever. I want to touch upon a point that you just brought up that I think is so vital. You recognize the interconnectedness of K-12 and higher ed, and that CSU is going to serve a large portion of the state students who will seek a post-secondary education. So what do you think you as a trustee can and should be doing to ensure that there is better alignment between K-12 and the CSU system so that more students are seamlessly reaching their college dreams?
I'm relatively new, so I was appointed back in November. So I'm still somewhat figuring out the answer to this and really excited to continue to learn more. Some of the initial places that I know that I want to see a bit of this work happening within the CSU system, there's a huge push for toward Graduation Initiative 2025. I'm wildly supportive of that work. And the way in which I would see that as a seamless transition is a student who shows up at a college's door deemed ready by our system should truly have a pathway to graduating from college in 4 years, and certainly within 6. Ideally, the more and more students we can allow to move through in 4 years, the better. So I'm excited for all of the work that's happening on CSU campuses now to begin to identify and come up with better solutions to meet the needs of students to help them progress toward a degree and progress toward that degree more quickly. I think there's a lot more work that needs to happen to ensure that what we are deeming ready coming out of high school matches with what a college thinks it means to be ready. And the more we can do that in ways, right now we have some pretty imperfect solutions to that. Courses with grades that folks don't really value. I'm glad that we got rid of the old entrance exams that didn't match to things that we did in high school. But there are more and more ways that we can make the system work. I also just think we have a whole lot of young people who start in a community college with the intention to transfer to a 4-year and to earn a 4-year degree. The more we can make that process seamless and work for the student rather than work for the system in which they're in, the better we'll be in terms of meeting the needs of young people and helping them earn degrees.
So Diego, you just touched upon several different critical issues that I would love to unpack a little bit further. So one of them being that you are committed to ensuring that more students are graduating within 4 years. And I want to repeat that, within 4 years, not a 6-year graduation rate, that we are looking to timely graduation, and that is going to be a goal that you as a trustee are going to push to support. So critical. But I also want to talk about this recognition that we need to do a better job ensuring that what we are requiring of students for admissions matches students and the state's needs, is truly demonstrative of their capability. So, the campaign has, for the last 2 years, been very engaged in really opposing the CSU effort to raise the bar on admissions requirements by establishing an additional requirement of admissions quantitative reasoning for students graduating from high school. Now, we've been concerned with the equity implications and some analyses that showed that if you are Black and Latinx, with that raising of the bar, fewer students would have access. And I would love to talk to you. I know right now an analysis of the potential impact of a policy change of this magnitude is happening, but it will be coming back before you and the trustees for a vote. I would love to talk to you about how you see the trustees' role in being intentional and thoughtful around raising admission standards.
Yeah. I'm going to say one thing in response to the 4-year, and then I'll get to the quantitative reasoning. I think it's so critical that we think about 4-year graduation for 2 reasons. First is for young people themselves, the sooner they can get to and through school, the sooner they can get into the workplace. And for so many people, the goal of college is to help them get into a job where they can truly transform their lives and provide for themselves and their family. And so the sooner we can do that, the better off they are. It's also for the college an opportunity to increase capacity without increasing cost, because we can allow more spaces to be open. Right now, places like Fresno State in previous years have had to turn away highly qualified candidates right here in the Central Valley who so often are place-based and homebound and aren't going to accept a spot at Sonoma State or at a different CSU. And so we want to find ways to meet needs, to increase capacity. That's a pretty costly endeavor. We can also do that by getting more kids to and through faster. All right, so I'll put that aside, Jesse, and talk about quantitative.
You're speaking my language though, Diego. I love it.
There are a couple of things. The first is it's such a tough question to consider, because we know until and unless we ask and expect more, as we used to always say when I was a high school teacher and principal, students will rise or fall to the expectations you set for them. And so I know that we want to have high expectations and that young people can do so much more. I know that right off the bat. Full stop. And so a new thought entirely is, and sometimes the way that we ask more is by literally just asking for more courses, for more things, and by adding a 4th year of math, instead of really asking, do we need all of these different kinds of math for a student to be successful at this school in this program? And I'm really excited to think about, is it really that we actually need a 4th year of math? You need to get through Algebra 2, and then on top of that, you need a QR appropriate course. Or is it that we just want to make sure that some of the skills of quantitative reasoning, what a mathematician might think of as just mathematical fluency, the ability to solve problems logically, like, should we be considering embedding that, infusing that into some of those pieces? It's easier for us in the CSU system to solve this through sort of what I might consider a blunt instrument, adding a 4th year. because we don't have influence into exactly what is in the standards for each of the courses. But in reality, what I think we're asking for is more students coming with that mathematical fluency and that ability to do quantitative reasoning. And the only solution at the moment is to add that fourth year. I worry, like you named, about some of the equity implications. I joined the board after they made the initial decision to launch the study. Since then, I've been waiting, bated breath. I don't know that you can call it bated breath over 6-7 months, but had been waiting to see what are we seeing come back from the study? What are the equity implications going to be in terms of, will this affect access to even being able to meet the minimum requirements to do this? How does that look different in different parts of the state, in different districts? So I don't know what that's going to look like, but I certainly want to see, does this affect access? And are we seeing that this is actually raising the bar? Or are we seeing that this is just another sort of hoop for young people to jump through? So these are the things I want to see.
So you're wrestling with all of the right questions. And I think that, you articulated some critical points here. We need to be asking, what are the skills? What are the learning outcomes we're seeking? And are we in fact imposing the right policy changes to get to that, if that is truly the goal? I also think, part of what you said earlier about this need to be more intentional in the way that K-12 and higher ed is interacting gets to this question. If we are doing a better job of facilitating healthy partnerships and collaboration, then you aren't having to act independently. You're in fact working with your system partners at the K-12 level to ensure that students are prepared and that we're doing everything to support them every step of the way. So thank you for your thoughtful response. You did raise capacity constraints as a real issue. Now, I know that some who are more skeptical have worried that a fourth year quantitative reasoning requirement is a enrollment management technique. We also know that there are very real capacity limitations at the CSU. And one of the questions that consistently comes up with researchers, with policymakers, is should we be revisiting the enrollment caps at the CSU? And if so, what should those of us in the field be doing to ensure that we can meet the future capacity needs of students in our state?
You're going to know these numbers so much better than I do, Jesse, so forgive me and please correct me if I get the numbers wrong. I think it was PPIC who came out with a report a handful of years ago saying that we were going to be something like 1 million bachelor's degrees short in the next 10 years. Is that right?
Yes. So they came out with a report that said 1 million, and then they came out with a revision that estimates even higher shortages of bachelor's degrees.
I remember at the time reading that report and trying to break that down to how many more college degrees that would mean Fresno State needed to help pull out. We had looked at Fresno State alone to try and build toward the 1 million would need 30,000 additional college graduates, which would have been another roughly 3,000 a year. Which, when I began to think at that level, just began to realize the magnitude of what we were really talking about. And it's staggering. And I don't, if anything, I guess I would say we should not be looking for ways to try and make it harder to earn a college degree. We should be looking for ways to open the door so that more young people truly have access to do it, are prepared to do it, and have a chance to do it quickly and make their way through. It's the right thing to do for young people. And as that PPIC report named, it's also the right thing to do for our communities. Are just with the changing nature of work, it is critical that we are ensuring that we have the workforce that's going to be ready to propel each of our communities.
That's right. No, I mean, You said it so well. If we do not figure out a way to provide students with seats, our state will suffer, our economy will suffer, and our students will suffer. So Diego, I want to hopefully ask you a bit of a lighter question. I know that your heart is in the Central Valley, and I appreciate the way you are thinking about the policy ramifications at a local level and what you will need to do to produce the types of degrees necessary to meet future workforce needs. But I also want to talk about the fact that you are representing an incredibly important and often missing Valley voice. So, we know that the Valley is underrepresented at every level of appointments in higher education systems. And that you are in your role serving as that Valley voice that will help hopefully elevate the region and ensure that it's not an afterthought in critical dialogues. Talk to me about why the Valley is so important to you and why ensuring that students and families in the Valley have a proverbial seat at the table has been always core to your agenda.
There are two questions baked into that, and I love both of them. I'm going to harken back to my dad for a minute. When he first moved to California, he and his family were farm workers. They were picking here in the Central Valley. Probably 10 years ago now, my wife and I were living in the Bay Area. We were living in Mountain View. And my dad came to visit. And he was saying how different it was because he used to pick there too. And he's like, oh, these used to all be orchards. And there was one house on our block that was this big giant house. And he's like, I bet that was the farmer's old house. And then it was a whole subdivision around it of just residential neighborhood now. Not a fruit tree to be seen. And it's amazing to me. Part of the reason I just have such love for the Valley is because to hear my dad say it, 60 years ago, 50 years ago, yeah, gosh, it would be 60 years ago now. When he grew up, he was picking, and both places were places you went to pick. And now you see that, as he says, you go up and you see Silicon Valley, and then in the Central Valley, you see Con Valley, where we made a different choice to bring in a whole lot of jails. And we don't have the same thriving economy and thriving pieces. And so, but the potential of the people is there. There is nothing magical about the Bay Area that says if you live in the Bay, you have better potential. We actually have amazing, amazing people who live right here in the Valley and are ready to dedicate their time, talent, and treasure to making this an amazing place to live too. And we're seeing pockets of that and all of that energy. And I just have a deep belief in this place and love raising my girls here with my wife and want to make sure that more and more, as my girls grow up, as they're raising families, that they feel excited about and see the potential in places like Fresno, like the Central Valley. So that's the first half of the question. And then the second half is I'm deeply privileged to have gone to the schools I've had, to have the parents I have, and I'm aware of that privilege and take it seriously every single day, and try and make sure that I don't forget where we came from and what we grew up from. And I'm aware that, I've had some amazing chances to just continue to grow my impact. And I'm so thankful for that every day, and try never to forget that there are amazing people right here in our community who have the same desire I have the same abilities I have, and are ready to contribute to the conversation. And they are students. Like, if you get a chance to actually sit down and talk to students, they have amazing ideas of what we can do differently. They are parents who love their children deeply and have critical insight into how we can be doing better. They are teachers and professors. They are just at every single level. So I just think, one, we've got to focus in places like Fresno and the Valley. And two, one of the best ways to do that is to elevate the voices of the people who are here, who have talent, who have passion, and who have insight and belong at the table, making these decisions.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, you know, Diego, I spent many years at the beginning of my career as a community organizer with the Great Valley Center. And it was so difficult for me to leave the region to go to Sacramento to lead our state policy work, because I felt so deeply connected to the people who, you know, against all odds, were doing incredible work. To see people like you leave the Valley, come back, and then continue to be that voice of inclusion, of equity, of opportunity is just so heartwarming. And I'm grateful to you for your leadership. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we're going to open it up to audience questions. We're getting a lot of great questions in the chat. So this really gets to the reality that the majority of our students will start their higher ed journey at a community college. We know this to be true in the Central Valley as well. And that for those students, unfortunately, a woefully inadequate number will successfully reach their transfer goal. We know that only 4%, less than 4%, our most recent data shows that it's not even 3% at this point of students will successfully transfer after the point of enrollment at a community college within 2 years. Now, the data improves when you bump it out to 6 years, but we know that very few students and families think it's going to take 6 years to reach transfer and a 4-year university. So as a trustee, you have a real opportunity to improve transfer. The Campaign for College Opportunity is leading an effort this year with AB 928 to create better alignment between our 2- and 4-year colleges to ensure that the associate degree for transfer is a simplified and preferred pathway for students across the state. What do you see as the opportunities to improve the transfer pipeline?
I'll take this as 2 parts, Jesse. The first is just, it feels critical that we solve this for all of the reasons you said, plus. Some of the pluses are, for so many young people, community college is the first step because it is a close to home option, because it is a significantly more affordable option. And so we need to ensure that the same promise we have if they come onto our campus as a freshman right out of high school, we also have if they're transferring. And the same belief that I have about trying to make sure that more kids get through in 4 years would transfer over, no pun intended, to transfer students. The hope that they could start at a community college, could work their way through in a really timely fashion to get a transfer degree, and then to graduate with a 4-year degree. I would say that all of the progress with the ADT is really encouraging on one front. I remember it didn't feel like that long ago when I was coming out of high school, but I guess it was a while ago. And a couple of my friends went to Fresno City here, which was just a few blocks from where I was raised. And yeah, and you know, some of them transferred, most didn't. And for those who transferred, it often took a lot of time. And then when they transferred, they actually realized that they transferred without 2 full years of credit under their belt. And so they were sort of starting even further behind. So I think ADT is a huge step in the right direction toward that end. I think the more and more we can actually be trying to make this one contiguous pathway, so the more we can be counseling students at the community college level with these courses are even something as simple, and you know this so much better than I do. I think there's still work for us to do on naming courses in ways to just make it abundantly clear, taking this class here is going to count over
Well,
there.
Diego, we're actually sponsoring legislation to create a common course numbering system across the state, as we see successfully implemented in other high-performing states across the country, so that we are simplifying that process for students.
And so often I've said this, I said this during the process of joining this board. So often we make choices that work for the system itself, but don't work for the user of the system, the young people in our community who really need it to work for them. And they're like, I don't care what Fresno City calls this thing. I don't care what Fresno State calls it. Does this count as an English credit? Is like the key thing that I want the answer to. And so the more we can get that level of consistency, and I know that there's work to do on that end. Some of it is ours as trustees to ensure that we are supporting legislation, to ensure that we are trying to create those pathways. And some of it is campus by campus, creating those sorts of connections. My understanding is that Long Beach has done a lot of work sort of, and they are ahead of the game. Ideally, we wouldn't have to do this one campus by one,
That's
but
right.
I do know that there is work that we can do that's really going to help us sort of streamline and make some of these systems work for young people rather than working for the system itself.
So I want to repeat this. So you talk about designing systems that are student-centered, systems that work for students, and not designing systems that work for institutions, just institutions, right? So
right.
Critical, because if we are not keeping students at the center of everything we do, we are going to continue to see students stop out, not reach their full potential, and not be supported in crossing the finish line with a degree to show for their work. So I want to transfer, pun intended, transfer our attention now to some questions that we've received from participants. And I think the first one is so timely. It's related to COVID. How can we have a conversation in today's climate and context and not address the COVID reality? So this participant says that just 7,000 of 916,000 jobs added back by the economy went to adults with high school diplomas, but no degrees. That's far less than the 1%. So clearly the value of college degrees only continues to rise. What strategies should the CSU be employing to bring students back who have stopped out due to COVID? And we've heard heartbreaking stories of students who, due to a variety of factors, have abandoned their college dreams. What can the CSU do to bring them back?
There are a couple of things that have already been happening that I've been so excited to see. I can take no credit as a trustee as so much of this work was happening from the chancellor's office and the work that trustees before me began to put in place. But there's so much work already happening to meet the immediate needs of young people, whether it's support in finding housing, food pantries, support in finding, maintaining jobs, mental health supports. I think every one of those has helped some of these numbers, which are drastic, be less drastic than they could have been. So I'm pleased to see those. I think we need to continue that work post-COVID. I think what we've seen is if there are issues like these affecting young people, if there are financial hardships, food insecurity, housing insecurity, they are not going to be able to put the time and attention to school, and they're going to have to make some of those. So I'm excited that we've done those, and I believe deeply that we need to maintain that. That's first. There's a lot of work happening right now about trying to find ways to find folks who have earned credits and actually actively reach out. Okay, you've earned credits, but you haven't yet earned a degree. Mm-hmm. And we're actually actively now beginning to reach back out and say, is now the right time? There are moments, and I think about some of my dearest friends, where part of the reason that they took a while is life got in the way. And there is nothing a system necessarily could have done. Mom got sick. I needed to go home and be with mom. And if those people who are really close to me in my life maybe didn't have my parents or their parents or someone else encouraging them to get back, they easily could have just walked away. And in this case, we shouldn't rely on middle-class parents playing that role. And instead, the CSU can and should play a role in reaching back out, encouraging, ensuring, and trying to find space for folks who have earned credits, are close to a degree, but have yet to earn that degree.
Yeah, absolutely, Diego. And I think one of your points is so important around this idea that we have to sustain this work and these investments beyond this initial phase of COVID recovery, because we know the trauma, the necessary supports are going to continue for many years to come. And if we churn our attention and don't provide students with what they need next year and beyond, I think we will continue to potentially see great students stopping out. So a couple other questions that we have from participants right now, and this is one around graduation rates. So because four-year graduation rates are ideal and helpful for students and the CSU, what ways can the CSU increase graduation rates? And you talked a little bit about this and your commitment to this.
There are some really interesting strategies happening at various campuses. I'm going to speak to a few of them. I'm going to get which campuses are doing which wrong. Or I'm just not even going to say which are doing which, but I'll tell you some of the ones that pop to mind. And then I'm going to talk to you about what I think the trustees can do about this. So we've seen some really promising practices. One that I'll name is a focus on building belonging. There's huge science that in the K-12 space we've been working on for a while that colleges and universities are also picking up on, and some of our CSU campuses are now working on, which show that for many first-generation students, there is a deep sense that they simply don't belong on a college campus. And so the first time college gets hard, it reinforces self-doubt that they even are a college kid in the first place. So they may struggle with the test, with a paper, they may not know how to do a piece. And internally, they may begin to start a narrative of, you know what, I knew it. I'm just not like these other kids who are here. And I guess everyone who told me this wasn't the right choice was right. I was wrong. I shouldn't be here. And there are quick and simple interventions that you can put in place. Some of our CSU campuses have begun to do this to help young people see, especially first generation students see, college is hard for everyone. And struggling does not mean that this isn't a place for you. In fact, here are folks who have found success, but who struggled too. And by simply showing something as simple as that, you see a shift in how they approach struggle. And these are not students who lack resilience. They lack a sense of belonging and a belief that school is meant for them. And so there are interventions happening there with freshmen to help more freshmen persist and stay through to sophomore year. And then once they do that, we see that's one. A second that we're seeing that I'm really encouraged by is really proactive counseling. So for so long, so many of our counseling interventions and supports waited for a student to access that support. And instead, we're now just, some of our CSU campuses have identified ways to proactively identify students who might be on a path toward failing a course, toward dropping out, toward some other, and just reaching out with a text, with a call, with an email saying, hey, I see XYZ. Do you want to come in and find time to ABC? And so there are just some really powerful solutions that we're seeing there. So I think those are a couple of the examples. What's been challenging is that there are probably 10, 15 more that I've read about in our packets that we've heard about from presidents and from other members at the chancellor's office, and they are so exciting, and they're happening campus at a time. And I'd love as a trustee to maintain the autonomy and control at local campuses and somehow find a way to build up a more common set of best practices that, if we're seeing this proactive counseling work, is there a way to ensure that we're seeing that across all 23 campuses? And I do believe that as we're seeing more successes individual campuses, it will naturally ripple out. But I also would love to see that happening faster.
I want to recognize at the heart of these two strategies, what you've identified is campuses being proactive so that students are not burdened to be fortunate enough to progress. The campuses are doing everything within their power to cultivate a sense of belonging and to create the conditions and paths for students to succeed. And I think that's so critical. So we're going to go to a final quick question, and then we're going to do our lightning round before we close out this wonderful conversation. Diego, I could talk to you all day. So this last question is so good. It's really about how you see higher ed advocates better connecting with CSU trustees to collaborate. What would you suggest for our higher ed advocates who are watching, if they're seeking to have a better relationship with you and collaborate more with you and other trustees?
I think there are a couple of ways. And one, if you put me on the spot earlier, Jesse, and embarrass me, I'll do the same. I remember a meeting that we had shortly after I started where I just reached out and said, hey, what can I learn? And one of the best things you are able to do as an advocate is to have a quick meeting and then to say, here are 3 things we've produced. You may want to read these. And I didn't read them the next day, but I certainly read them and they were so helpful. So having some sort of tools and structures so that I could just continue my own journey was really, really helpful. And when I was an education advocate at Go Public Schools Fresno, this took me a while where I wanted that time to be face-to-face, where I had a bunch of knowledge in my head and I wanted time with the superintendent or a board member to sort of get that across, and realized that often what I needed to do was turn that into a quick report or a 2-pager or something that I could follow up with so that they had time, as it made sense. I've got a family, I've got a job, all the pieces. And so it's challenging at times for me to find all the time for meetings. I try and do it as much as I can. And I would certainly say that's one strategy, but the more you can do what you all did at the campaign of saying, and after a 30-minute meeting, here are 3 reports. And when you have time, you should peruse these and learn more about these. And these are important topics. So I would certainly say that's
Thank you. No, Diego, I appreciate that. And I appreciate that you took the time as a new trustee to do that reading. And we will continue to bring forward what we hope will be research that makes you a stronger trustee and helps inform your thinking. So we're going to go and close out with our lightning round. Now, I have to tell you, Diego, there are no right or wrong answers. These are fun questions. So answer whatever is top of mind. But we're going to do these speed round fashion. So the first question is coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Got it. Me too. What is in your Netflix queue right now?
We are watching Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I have 2 daughters who are 9 and 10. We are on the very last Avengers movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This has been a pandemic project to get all the way through. And we've been watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on Netflix as a family.
My son would love that. So Dodgers or Giants?
Giants, hardcore.
Your go-to snack?
Wow. I would say cheese. I really like sliced cheese as just like a quick snack.
Your favorite holiday?
Christmas.
Your most used emoji?
The little rolling on the floor, laughing, crying.
That says so much about you. I love this question. The best quarantine survival tip?
Watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe 23 movies with my girls. It's given us like months and months of activities. And we did Star Wars before that. We've done like a whole.
Oh, I love it. Movie themes. This is good. So you're the last book that you've read.
I just finished. I'm actually going to look this up because I only listen to books. Hold on. It is called, I know I was supposed to answer quickly. Parable of the Sower, I think, by Octavia Butler, which is, there's a book called Emergent Strategy, which is a really amazing book about how change happens. And it was based off of this African-American science fiction writer, Octavia Butler. I love science fiction. So I just went and read her book. It's amazing.
Oh, I love it. We'll have to drop that. Oh, somebody from our chat, Shay Collins, our comms person, says that's my favorite. We'll make sure we put it up in the chat as well for others. And then this is the final question. Your last thought usually before you go to sleep.
This is really terrible. I almost always, before I go to bed, check my calendar for the next day. I've got my iPhone sitting next to me, like everything that every sleep doctor would tell you about what you should not do, I break. And I will often check my calendar to see when my first meeting is the next morning, to see when I have to set my alarm. It's a terrible.
Now, Diego,
now that I've
I'm
said
right
it,
there
I will
with
go
you.
fix it.
Well, that's all. So let me just say, Diego, this has been a wonderful conversation. And for those of you who had a chance to join us, we are grateful that you've spent an hour of your afternoon with us. Trustee Diego Arambula, a truly innovative, student-centered leader. It has been just such a pleasure to hear your thoughts about innovating and impacting this higher ed space in your new role. We hope that those of you who've joined us will continue to join us for upcoming lunch break sessions as we explore deep conversations with new appointees and higher ed leaders across the state. Again, Jesse Ryan, Executive Vice President with the Campaign for College Opportunity. We are so grateful to Trustee Diego Arambula for his time today, and for those of you who joined us for this important conversation. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you, Diego. That was wonderful. That was great.
I really appreciated the time. Thank you. Thank you.